Hey everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to the first of many New York Film Fest coverage reviews. This is the New York Film Fest, the 62nd New York Film Fest, and I was looking at my records. I first went to the New York Film Fest in 2016, which means it's been almost a whole decade that I've been at this festival, and time really does fly. But it has been a part of my life for now a third of my life, which is really, really interesting, really, really cool. It's just my favorite place to be at this time of year. I mean, the autumn atmosphere is great. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's always fun meeting with fans of film and historians and critics and sometimes even celebrities, and just kind of getting to share a love of something with a bunch of people in the greatest weather, in the greatest venues at Lincoln Center in New York City. I think Lincoln Center just does such a great job with the festivals. So this is a review for Nickel Boys, but this is also kind of my way of saying thank you so far. This festival's not over. I'm still there. But I am just very grateful to the staff, the volunteers, all the programmers who put the festival together, and all the people that allow for me to have that opportunity to see the festival, including my real job, letting me have the time off of work to go, my family for being, willing to give me a car to get to the festival, to get to the train, to get to the festival, the festival. I feel like I'm into the woods, but it has been such a gift to go all these years. And this year I really wanted to go like all out. I wanted to get as many tickets for as many films because this is the most excited I've been for a crop of films at the festival. A lot of these films I was either very intrigued by or like just enthusiastic to see, whether it be because of the premise, because of the cast, or the filmmakers, and just because I've been hearing great things from other people around me. And I love the festival because it kind of lets me go into some of these with an open mind. There aren't a ton of reviews out there yet, so I don't necessarily know what I should be feeling about these movies. I can kind of go in and have an experience and say, oh, I didn't really like that, or wow, this is amazing. Why is no one talking about it? Whereas I think if you were to watch these in January or February, everyone's kind of made the consensus. I mean, we see that with a lot of the bigger blockbuster films. It's like, oh, I know I'm going to go see this movie that everyone's raving about, so I feel like I have to like it in a way. Whereas at the festival, it feels like it's a blank slate. I don't have to feel the pressure to like anything or not. And I am usually very honest. 99% of the time, I am as honest as possible on this channel. But even then, there's sometimes those moments where I get trapped with the critical mind think of the masses and kind of, catering to what I believe the opinion should be about a movie. And I've been trying to be better lately about really just sticking to my guns and really giving my own 100% honest opinion. And I think a movie like Nickel Boys is going to be a great kind of way to open that kind of discourse and that sentiment, because this is a film that has been getting a lot of raves. A lot of people are saying this is a transcendent piece of cinema. And in some ways I do agree, but I also think there's a very small contingent, but it is a contingent. There are some people out there that are looking at this and are like, I don't get it. I don't like it. I felt alienated. And I also get that perspective too. And we're going to talk about it today. But New York Film Fest opened with Nickel Boys. This was their big opening night play. RaMell Ross's narrative feature directorial debut, I believe. He had done some documentaries, and you can definitely tell that in his style. I mean, he has a very documentary-like kind of approach to the material, which is really, really cool for a story like this. It follows these two teenage boys who are sent to a reform school, and you start to see not only their bond grow as they have to kind of overcome all these atrocities, but you really get to catch a glimpse of the horrible things going on in some of these reform schools, particularly this one in the Dozier School for Boys in Florida. And I just thought it was a really interesting, narrative. I think there were really interesting revelations and surprises and things I didn't know about this part of the world, this kind of time period, and what was going on in some of these schools. This specific school I knew nothing about. Before they introduced the film, they kind of mentioned like it's been this so or so years since the bodies were found, and I'm like, the bodies were found. Are we about to watch a horror film? Are we about to watch something really much darker than I expected? And yes, we were in for a pretty dark surprise. But Nickel Boys, I think most people are going to be talking about, not for its story, because I think there is a story there. There is a narrative, obviously. Most films have it. 99% of films have a story to follow, whether it's coherent or not. But this film, I think, is mostly going to be talked about for its style and how its style informs the narrative and informs the characters. And I think this is where I would say Nickel Boys has the greatest strength and the greatest weakness, because I think the style, and this style that RaMell Ross brings to it, is this entire POV person perspective for the entire film. So every single shot of the film is seen through one of the two main characters' eyes. There are occasional scenes where you see a character from the back of their head because we're following them when they're older, and I won't say who that character is or who plays him in case you don't know. But for the majority of the film, it follows these two guys from their eyes. So it almost feels like a video game in that way, but I don't want to compare it to a video game because it's very, very different in its approach. But it does feel like that, where you're not seeing the character's face as they're talking. You are witnessing their hands coming into camera. If you're looking at it from a first person perspective, you are seeing what they are seeing. You are seeing their reflection in the mirror. You can see them, but you can only see their full body when they are in their reflection or when it shifts to the other character. And I think that is a help for this device, is having two characters. That way you're not all locked into one. You can kind of bounce back and forth. So when they are having a conversation, you can show both sides of that conversation. It doesn't feel so alienating and trapping in that way. And I have heard a lot of people, and I do kind of agree with this, say that this is the biggest strength of the movie because it is such a big, bold, stylistic swing that I think not many people expected going into a movie like this, because you could make a very straightforward biopic about this. You know, you can make something that is just kind of very formulaic in a good way, but like really just kind of hammer home the messaging and just show things in a very visually beautiful way, but not necessarily have to take a bold, like, experimental swing. But what I really love that RaMell Ross does, and so many people are sharing this opinion, is that he does take this bold narrative swing, this bold directorial swing, this bold way of showing things through the eyes of the character you're following, so you feel the most attached and immersed into that life as you can. Now, the negative side to this, and I do also share this bit of opinion a little bit as well, especially in the first act or two, it takes a little while to sink into. And because it is such a distinct stylistic choice, and because the whole movie is shown from that point of view, there's no room to breathe. It's almost like you're too engrossed in this. You are too submerged into the actual consciousness of this character, that it almost feels alienating in a way, because you're thinking about the style. It's one of those things where the style is so impressive, but you're also very much noticing the style. And sometimes you're focusing more on the style than you are the themes, the characters, the emotional threads of the movie. And this is a similar thing I felt with like 1917, right? Like, where it's like one long take. And I think it's really impressive, but it's also like 90% of the time I'm thinking about the one take rather than I am, oh, what are these characters' relationships? What is this character going through? And I think for that film, it really stalls the pacing for me, because I'm just like, kind of, all right, I get what we're doing. Now let's advance this. And here I think it's not as bad as 1917 in that respect, whereas like I still was able to finally engross myself in it by the end. But for the first two acts, I felt a little alienated. And it's very funny because this is supposed to be a way to immerse you even more in the character, but in a way it took me out of it because it was just such a bold stylistic choice that it's impossible to ignore. But I do think films like this are so important because 10, 20, 30 years from now, this might be the norm. We might see more stories shown from this first person point of view. And I know there's been other movies like this. This isn't the first of its kind to do this. I remember there was a movie like Hardcore Harry or Henry or something that came out a few years ago that was very similar. Everything was shown from a first person POV. But I think especially for this story, it justifies it in the emotional and thematic stuff it's doing at the end of the film. And I would be a total villain to spoil the ending for you. So I'm not going to do that right now because most people haven't seen it yet. But I think when you finally see what these characters build to, and when you find out what this kind of these flash forward scenes, who this character is that we're following, and once you understand what happens at the end of this character's journey, it makes 100% sense why all of this is being shown from a first person perspective, and why these two boys are sharing kind of this very interesting visual language, through the direction of the film. So I really think it's one of those films that if I rewatch, I'm going to be fully on board, because, when you're watching something for the first time, you don't know where it's going. So you're just kind of questioning, is this just style for style's sake? Like, I get that RaMell Ross was trying to make us feel as empathetic as we could towards these characters by literally putting us in their shoes. That is 100% recognized from the top. But then after that, I'm like, okay, now where do we go? And I think once you see where the film goes, now when I rewatch it, I'm going to be able to be like, oh, this makes so much sense why we are seeing things in this way, in this perspective. And I think it is a brilliant choice. But I also understand why some people might be turned off by it, because if you are not the type of person who wants to be watching everything from a first person point of view, then you're totally justified to not like it. And I think there's going to be a lot of people when this film kind of hits the mainstream costume that are gonna feel alienated for the reasons I did in the first two acts. But I hope they, like myself, are won over by the end. I think the performances are pretty good. I think because a lot of it is first person, the actors aren't getting to act alongside other actors. They almost have to act to a camera. It's like when you film an audition at home, for actors who know this. You film an audition at home and you're looking at your phone, and it almost feels like there's a wall up because you don't have that engagement of like getting to actually act alongside another person. But then when you're in the room and you're in front of a casting director and you have a script and you have a scene partner, it opens you up. You are able to feel a little bit more alive in the space. And that's how I felt with Nickel Boys. I felt like a lot of the actors struggled with actually communicating with the camera. It's like they have to act to a lens, which is much harder than acting alongside another person. With one exception, that is Anjanou Ellis Taylor, who you could throw a brick wall, you could throw a camera at her, a blank page, whatever, she is going to act the crap out of it. She is just so, so good that, I was almost convinced that that camera was just another person because of how well she was engaging with the lens. But it is a tricky task, and I imagine I'd have a similar difficulty if I was on set having to act alongside this camera and not actually act alongside another person. Now, there might have been someone behind the camera, like feeding the lines and stuff, but still, the eye contact has to be with the lens. And I think Anjanou Ellis Taylor proves that it is possible, because she's so good. She has some scenes in this thing that are just so emotionally devastating, that are some of the highlights of her career so far. I've loved her in other things like King Richard, and she's great in Origin. From what I've heard, I haven't seen that movie, but I've seen clips of it. I'm a big fan of Anjanou Ellis Taylor, and I think there is a world where she could get a supporting actress nomination for this if this film gets into Best Picture and Director and Screenplay, which I think it could and should. I do think it's one of those movies that, even though I'm not leaving the theater being like, wow, that was amazing, that was what a vision, I still can understand that this is something brilliant. Like, this could be a trendsetter if 10, 20, 30 years from now, this becomes the norm and more stories are told like this. I think there's a real possibility that we're going to see, everyone kind of refer to some movies as a Nickel Boys. Like, oh my God, they did a Nickel Boys, like, I feel like this could be that trendsetter in that way, where first person point of view storytelling, like, this is the Citizen Kane of that style. And I do think that's really cool. It's really cool kind of seeing this really different art form kind of unfold before your eyes. And even though it takes some getting used to, I think once you finally get on board with it 100% on the ride, I think it's a truly rewarding experience. So I do think Nickel Boys is very good. I think a lot of people are going to be really excited when they see it. And it does hit those emotional beats, especially toward the end. And I do hope, with more rewatches, I am able to grow even fonder and appreciation for it, because I think RaMell Ross is a really promising storyteller. Like, I really am excited to see whatever he does next, because I wonder what else he can do. He's done the documentary stuff. He's done this, which is such a unique stylistic swing. Now, what does he do with his next film? What else can he pull up his sleeve? What other tricks does he have up the hat? So I think that is going to be the most exciting thing, is watching his career grow. I think Nickel Boys is going to be a film that is going to really resonate with so many. It's going to be something that, even if you don't like it, because it's not a film you necessarily enjoy for its story, because it's a hard story, it's a tragic story, but I think you can still really appreciate what's going on stylistically. Just the fact that they're able to get all these shots, just the fact that they're able to, position the camera in the perfect place to where it feels like this is the character's eyes we're seeing things through. And I think that's a very underrated element of Nickel Boys. I think a lot of people are thinking about the directorial choice of doing it, but not really acknowledging the actual technique it takes in executing that choice. And I think what they do to make this effect seen and really feel worthwhile, I just think it's a magical, bout of cinematography, of lighting, of sound. The sound work in this thing is very, very solid. I really liked it. It's not going to be my best of the fest, because, spoiler alert, I've seen a lot more other films so far. I'm recording this a little bit later than when I saw this film, because I wanted to kind of let it sit, let it marinate, as is true with all these films that I'm going to review on the channel. But I think Nickel Boys is going to be one that, regardless of whether or not it's your favorite of the year or not, you're going to be talking about it regardless. It's not a film you can really ignore. And I love films like that kind of just demand and command your attention. So that's my review for Nickel Boys at New York Film Fest. What did you think? If you were at New York Film Fest, what did you think of the film? Let me know in the comments below. And please let me know what other films you're excited to hear me review so far. If you want to hear my out of theater reactions, you can go to my TikTok. I've been posting them the minute I leave the theater in Lincoln Center. Some of the views there are just so gorgeous. It's been really fun to kind of paint all my TikTok backdrops like that. But you can check out those out of theater reactions if you can't wait for these reviews. But the next review I have coming up is one that a lot of people are very excited about, and that is Anora. So please check that out. That is coming very, very soon. Otherwise, I'm Dylan. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more. Thanks.